Welcome to the Betting Above the Rim podcast. Today's date, December 11th, episode 104 in this podcast. Let's get started right away, folks, with what we call our tip-off topics. First topic off the bat needs to be talked about is Jimmy Butler. There was a report that came out by Shams a couple of days ago that talks about that Miami is interested in possibly trading Jimmy Butler. Now, when you look at the situation, folks, the key date to look at is December 15th. That's when free agent signings are open and can be traded and moved. Now, it doesn't affect Jimmy Butler, but it could affect the return that could come in for a guy in Jimmy Butler who is averaging 19 points per game, shooting at 56% from the floor. So how did this start with Jimmy Butler, right? Very simply put, this started with Jimmy Butler in the offseason when Jimmy Butler wanted to sign an extension. And basically, Pat Riley, because of the fact that Jimmy Butler, you could talk about it, maybe he takes games off, isn't readily available at some times, Riley said he wasn't going to do it. So it kind of upset Jimmy Butler, and he basically said, if you want to play and get paid, you got to be in the lineup. Now, when you look at Jimmy Butler over the course of his career, obviously we could talk about how great Jimmy Butler has been. A guy that scored 18.4 points per game. But do realize, folks, 19 points per game for Jimmy Butler is the lowest amount he's had since coming to Miami in 1920. So his points per game is down. Now, his shooting percentages are up. His three-point percentage is down from last year. So it's been a mixed bag. So when you start talking about it, where would Riles send him, right? He's not going to send him east. He's got to send them west. And the three teams that we've been hearing, right, are Golden State, Dallas, and Houston, which presents really, I would say, like three completely different scenarios, right? Team number one, Golden State, a team that with Steph Curry at his advantage, the same thing with Draymond Green, is now coming to the end of their run. So they're trying to extend the run. So when you look at it, who's going to be the main piece in the trade going back? Right, you would have to think it's going to be Andrew Wiggins, right? You figure, with Curry and Kuminga, maybe Kuminga's a part of it as well, but Andrew Wiggins has had a good resurgent year, and maybe it's a chance in Golden State to kind of part of selling him high based on what he did last year. So Andrew Wiggins is probably the key piece for Golden State. Now, when you go over to Dallas, that's where I think it gets interesting because who is the guy? Now, could you go with Kyrie being the main guy? Folks, maybe it's Klay Thompson. If Klay could get moved out to December 15th, maybe he becomes the key person that goes in the deal back because of that. And that would be an interesting three-guard alignment of, obviously, Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, and Jimmy Butler. That would be a great third wheel as Jimmy Butler. Then you go to Houston, a team that's on the come up. So you got the team in Golden State, the team that's at the end of the run, team in Dallas that's in the run, and the team in Houston that's trying to get to that run. So if it's Houston, who is it? Well, you're not going to trade Şengün. You're not going to trade, Van Vliet because you're not going to move him, right? So who is it? Is it Jalen Green? Maybe. Is it Jabari Smith, who would be very much enticing to a team like Miami? So it's going to be really interesting what we have going here in regards to Jimmy Butler and where he gets moved. Stay tuned to this, folks, because I think this is going to be something that we will be revisiting as we get closer to the trade deadline. Speaking of trades, has there been a team more of a disappointment? Well, maybe it's like the 76ers, who are playing better, by the way, than the Orleans Pelicans. Worst record in the Western Conference. And now there's talk about either CJ McCollum and or Herb Jones getting moved. CJ McCollum that's scoring 23 points per game, shooting at about 44% from the floor, right? 31.4% from three, which is not good numbers for a person, a scorer of his acumen. And you really have to look at the fact that also of Herb Jones being one of the better 3-and-D guys. Folks, it's very simple. Going into this year, I was very high on this team, right? I thought that this could be the run, right? But Trey Murphy was hurt. Zion's only played 6 games. B.I.'s now hurt, right? DeJounte missed a ton of time. Alvarado's missed a ton of time. Herb Jones missed a ton of time. Folks, I think it's time you talk about blowing this up. And you're talking about blowing this up. I don't know which one of these two guys gets moved, but I'm going to say this. Either Zion or B.I. got to get moved. You can't rely on these two guys. They don't stay healthy long enough, especially Zion. And the fact with changing agents for Brandon Ingram, I think this makes this more of a possibility that he gets moved over Zion. So that's something to watch out for. Is Brandon Ingram, can he get back healthy, get moved before February, or at the summer before we get into the talk of another extension? Remember, he tried to talk extension talk. Really quick, I want to double back to Jimmy Butler really quick, because one other point that just kind of escaped my mind here. I want people to realize Jimmy Butler is going to opt out. Okay? He's going to opt out for free agency at the end of the year. So you're basically getting a rental. So for that, it makes it more difficult unless Jimmy signs an extension with that franchise. Probably not, because he's going to want to get paid top dollar. So that's going to affect the value that comes back in a return. Kawhi Leonard is back. And do we care? I don't know. Because of Kawhi Leonard, he's always hurt. And he always seems to take his time coming back, is now back, at least practicing for the Clippers, according to head coach Tyronn Lue. So when you look at this Clipper team, they picked Kawhi over Paul George. And we see that now he is not healthy, now back. We got to see what happens here with the Clipper team that's really playing well at 14 up. If Kawhi is engaged and he's there, that's going to help this team out a lot. If he gets hurt again, I don't know what to think. Tennessee is the number one team in the country. Are they the top team in the country? We'll talk about this more on the other side here, but it's going to be interesting because the team, Rick Barnes' team played really well. Rick Barnes, one of the best coaches, never won a national championship. It'll be interesting to see if this team can close it down, and going to be in a really, 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 really tough SEC. They just beat Miami. They just beat Syracuse. They had good wins over Louisville, good win over Virginia. Obviously, they beat Baylor. Let's see here, because they got a big matchup coming up here. We'll talk about a little bit later on against the Illinois Fighting Illini this weekend before they get themselves into play in the SEC. Last topic here, it kind of deals with UCLA being number one in the women's side. Is UCLA the top team of women's college basketball? You could say maybe they are with the win over South Carolina. Folks, I can't take them over UConn. I just have this feeling about Paige Beckers, and now Izzy Fudd is back and healthy and starting. It will be interesting to see what happens with UCLA. I still think it's UConn, but the way South Carolina has looked, folks, you cannot mistake how great this team has been as of late with Dawn Staley, especially with that big win that they got over TCU over the weekend. South Carolina is a team that's absolutely loaded. And while Corey Close has done a fantastic job with this team, I don't know if they're going to be at a point where I think they're going to win a national championship. Obviously, having Lauren Betts and Kiki Rice are key, but I do think there are teams that are better. Coming up after the commercial break, we'll get into what we call the award tour, where we look at some awards, futures in the NBA and in college basketball, and I'll give you where my leans are. This is the Betting Above the Rim podcast. Make sure you tune in after the commercial break as we get into the award tour coming back after this commercial break. Welcome back to the Betting Above the Rim podcast. This topic is going to be kind of new here on the Betting Above the Rim podcast, and we're going to call it the Award Tour. In this segment, I'm going to give you some future odds, whether it's in the NBA, college basketball, men's and women's, the WNBA, when they come around this summer. Man, if they start doing unrivaled with bets in January, we'll have bets like that as well in the futures market. So let's focus our first topic with the award tour on the NBA Coach of the Year. Right now, Kenny Atkinson is the leader at the clubhouse at -120. Ime Udoka at 3-1. Jamal Mosley 10-1. Mazzulla 17-1. Ty Lue 19-1, along with Taylor Jenkins. Steve Kerr 40-1. 50-1 for Bud, Bickerstaff, and Dagnall, and then 60-1, not on this screen, with Tom Thibodeau. So let's kind of stay focused on the top of the board, right? Obviously, the job that Kenny Atkinson has done right now with the Cleveland Cavaliers is remarkable. Listen, at the end of the day, I told everyone when he went to Cleveland, this was a home run hire. This is a guy that can get the job done. This is a guy that showed himself well in Brooklyn. This is a guy that showed himself to develop young talent like Jonathan Kuminga and Moody and Podziemski while he was with Golden State. So I'm not shocked they're playing well. I'm shocked they're playing this well. And because they have the best record in the Eastern Conference and in the NBA, that's why Kenny Atkinson is sitting at -120 to be Coach of the Year. You look at the way this team is structured and played. It hasn't been the Donovan Mitchell show. There's other guys stepping up. Obviously, the player Darius Garland's been great. We've seen the elevation of Evan Mobley. You can look at Jared Allen, Karis LeVert. Both those guys have experience playing for Kenny Atkinson. Ty Jerome. And then obviously we get news today that Max Strus is going to make his season debut this Friday. So because of that, it makes sense for Kenny Atkinson to be number one. Second on the list is Ime Udoka. Another team that I was really high on going into this year because of the fact that how I saw them play the second half of last year and the fact that I think that Ime Udoka is one of the 10 best coaches in the league. He's gotten Houston to play really good basketball, especially on the defensive end. And I think people have to understand that's a tough thing. Yes. Do they have vets like Dylan Brooks and Fred VanVleet? Yes. But he's still got young guys, and Farron Sengun has took a big step, especially defensively. You look at the play of Jabari Smith's elevation. You look at Jalen Green. You look at Thompson off the bench, right? You look at this team, Cam Whitmore, Tari Eason. They're long. They're athletic. They defend. And that's why this team, Houston, is at 3-1 with Ime Udoka to win Coach of the Year, and they are right now in the quarterfinals of the NBA Cup. All the way down the end of the board, it's not there, is Tom Thibodeau. And I'm going to say this right now, folks. You can say, oh, here we go, coach of the Knicks again. Here you go. Listen, there's no coach that's changed his ways more than Tom Thibodeau. To the way that they play, to the free-flowing, to the offensive, to the fact that the 30 assists every night, the way Brunson is played, the way OG Anunoby, and obviously the integration of Karl Anthony Towns has been absolutely fantastic. Folks, 60-1 is a bargain. I don't think Tibbs can get there, but 60-1, if New York can tie up their defense, they could be in play. But the guy I'm focusing on is Jamal Mosley. This guy at 10-1, losing Banchero earlier in the year to an oblique injury, and now losing Wagner to the same oblique injury has been amazing what he has done. They're the best defensive team in the league. If they could just make some damn threes, they would win so many more games. Simply put, if Jamal Mosley can keep this team afloat until he gets Wagner and Banchero back, I think he is going to be my play for NBA Coach of the Year, and right now he is at 10-1 odds. Let's head over to the national championship picture in men's college basketball, where the Auburn Tigers are right now the leader in the clubhouse at 8-1, 9-1 for Duke, 12-1 to Houston, along with Gonzaga. Now, when you look at the top of the board here, you know, Auburn's played the most impressively so far. Bruce Pearl has his problems in the tournament. Duke has looked really good, but when they play a tight game, except that when they're at home, they don't play well. Houston, 12-1, they struggle to defend against really good teams. Gonzaga, Every year we think Mark Few is here. But there's a couple of teams I wouldn't really touch on quickly. First things first, my producer, Matty George, loves Tennessee at 15-1. The number one team in the country, 15-1 in the national championship. And Rick Barnes, another coach, is one of the best coaches to not win a national championship, needs to finally get this done. Look at that team in Tennessee with that record, especially could be Illinois, especially on the road, I do believe. Look at Tennessee like my man Matty George is talking about. But I'm going to go down the board, right? And that's at 17-1 or greater. That's Alabama, that's Iowa State, that's Kansas, that's UConn. All have had trip-ups in the last couple weeks. Nothing bigger than UConn's loss for 3 games in a row. Kansas losing back-to-back games versus Creighton and Missouri on the road. They have experience. They have coaching. They have guys that have won a national championship. Iowa State has the coach in the defense. And, of course, we could talk all we want about Alabama and Nate Oates. Really quick, Villanova, 3-1 to make the tournament. Folks, I'm back in. I went and watched them against Temple over the weekend. I'm really impressed by the play of Eric Dixon. Wooger Poplar is starting to settle in here. Listen, ever since Eric Rodel has been named AD, Kyle Neptune's team has played markedly better. If you look at the Big East, Creighton has been a disappointment. I know they got the win over Kansas. It's Marquette, it's UConn, it's St. John's, and could it be Villanova or Creighton? You figure the Big East is going to get 5 teams into the tournament. At 3-1 odds, if they can play consistent basketball, I am still a big believer in this Villanova team, especially when you got that 6'8", fifth-year lefty senior Eric Dixon who can punish you in the paint and can punish you from the three-point line. Coming up next, last segment, we're going to go into some of my favorite plays in college basketball, along with a buzzer beater in college basketball. Interesting news that came out just today about the NCAA tournament that I don't agree. This is your Betting Above the Rim podcast. We'll be back in a couple minutes to talk all things college basketball. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Betting Above the Rim podcast. Before I get into my scouting report of 4 college basketball games that I'm looking at for the rest of the week, starting with Thursday night, I want to just quickly double back to what we were talking about last segment in regard to the national championship picture. I want people to look at also Marquette at 30-1. Why? Shaka Smart's been to a Final Four. I know it was a long time ago at VCU. He's got the guard play. They're very good defensively, and they rebound the basketball well. So at 30-1, make sure you also take a look at Marquette to possibly win a national championship. Now to my scouting report of 4 games, starting off with the border, I shouldn't say the border war, the Battle of the State of Iowa in regards to Iowa State heading on the road to take on Iowa. Right now, line has Iowa State minus 5.5. with an over-under of 159.5. And right now, folks, simply put, this is an over game if I have seen it. If you look at Iowa State, folks, they have not scored less than, ready for this? I think it's 81 points this entire season. That's the lowest they've scored, is 81 points. And they've gone against some really good teams like Marquette, like Dayton, like Auburn, versus an Iowa team that really can't stop people defensively. They gave up 85 to Michigan, 80 in that loss versus Northwestern. That win over Northwestern, gave up 79. So they don't really stop teams. Simply put, TJ Osselberger's team is great offensively. I look at that game over 159.5. Or if you want to just take a look at just taking, the team props, maybe the team total would be something you'd look at. Next up, the battle for New Jersey. Seton Hall, Rutgers. Both teams have underachieved for different reasons. Seton Hall, just simply put, because you listened last time, they don't have the NIL money. They can't compete, losing all those guys, including Kadari Richmond and Dre Davis. Rutgers dealing with the expectations of being a big-time team with Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper. We'll talk about them next week a little bit. The number 2 and number 3 player, according to the ESPN big board for the 2025 NBA draft. This game, folks, I've been to these games. These are street fights and phone booths. This is under all day. Shaheen's going to slow the game down. He's going to make it, ready, Kevin Walsh, a rock fight. So wait for that number to come out. I'm sure I'll be doing a scouting report on Saturday morning. Look for that game to go under. Next, Tennessee at Illinois. Now, when you look at this Tennessee team, this is going to be a big test amongst big tests. 5:30 game. This is a tip-off. And I am leaning Tennessee. If you look at Illinois, they had a good win at home, 86-80 versus Wisconsin. They struggle on the road. And this is Tennessee, folks. This is the problem you're going to say about this is, besides going to Louisville, they haven't had a true road game. I'm going to bank on them trying to get the job done here. I really like what we have out of this team. Give me Tennessee minus points. Lastly, Gonzaga, UConn. Gonzaga continues to stack up games. I'm going to go with the UConn Huskies. I think they have started to right the ship a little bit after that 3-game losing streak in the Maui Invitational. As long as Dan Hurley keeps his head, Liam McNeely makes shots. They have Alex Caravan. I do think I do like UConn in that matchup. Really quick buzzer beater time here, folks. And the NCAA is talking about expanding the tournament. Oh no, what are we doing? Now they're talking about going from 68 to 72 or 76 teams. Simply put, folks, this is all about money and TV revenue. I have a suggestion. If you're going to expand this tournament, I don't want these marginal teams in the Big East, SEC, ACC, Big 12, right? I don't want these Big 10. I want the Cinderella teams. I want the mid-major teams. I want the A-10 to get 3 bids. I want, the Missouri Valley Conference to get an extra bid. I want these teams to go ahead that are 1-bid leagues and give some of these other teams opportunities to make the NCAA tournament. Simply put, folks, when we get to the tournament, we don't care about all these teams that are big-time teams. We care about the VCUs. We care about the Loyola Chicagos. We care about the St. Peters. That's what makes the NCAA tournament special. Thank you for listening for the Betting Above the Rim podcast. Remember, download that sports grid app. Pre-game, in-game, post-game, props, predictions, and more from the very best of the sports gambling industry. Thanks to my producer, Manny George, for already crushing it. Remember, folks, it's smarter to be on Sports Grid. Good night.